Hello. Today I just wanted to pop in briefly and share with you a novel that I had downloaded a few months ago and I just got around to finishing in the last week or so. This was the last novel I read. I think it might be considered somewhere along the lines of a legal thriller. And the reason why I downloaded it, which was on a whim, was because I believe I read the premise at the time and I found it conceptually interesting. So the idea is that there are a group of students who enroll in a rather lesser known law school, and they have these grand hopes of accumulating enough recompense once they graduate in the years following their matriculation to accrue enough financial compensation to swiftly pay their debts off. And they realize by their last fourth and final year at the school that it was all a hopeless endeavor, and they had essentially trapped themselves in a diploma mill, which is a school that is unaccredited by a major established agency and either accepts experience for credits towards graduation that is not divvied and exchanged on a accountable basis, or gives the students enrolled a low standard of work in exchange for easy A's and B's. So by the time this group of students realize that they're in their final semester at the law school and they're all very desperate and trying to seek some viable way to be able to pay off their debt, which is about $200,000 per person. And because of this desperation, they end up resorting to somewhat amusing antics in order to chase off creditors at various loan companies, and they even start an illegal law firm on the side in order to hustle low-income clients in order to secure jobs and cases that would grant them easy money, or in the hopes of getting a high-income personal injury lawsuit. And I thought this novel was interesting conceptually because even though I don't know all the ins and outs of the legal culture and the legal market, I know that education is one of the pervasive touchstones of our modern society and culture, and has been for a while, to put it lightly. And to realize that the fabric of somebody's education could be so easily and casually manipulated by this cadre of for-profit, easy setup law schools with their attendant cronies in these law firms that are just like sort of shell firms that are set up and propped up in order to hire a few graduating students each year just for marketing propaganda and spit them out in a couple years in a more complicated scheme to net millions and millions of dollars from this operation is something that, if in theory is prone to exist in a system, would be harmful to its young people, because the protagonists of this novel do not come from like extremely well off and powerful families, and part of what lured them to this law school was the allure of, an easy and safe path to a lucrative career. And once they realized that it was quite unattainable, and their chances of getting a job at a top-notch law firm or of feeling even prepared to make it in something more rigorous, although I think there are parts of that doubt and fear that are not quite substantiated. Not quite. I think that those doubts and fears are quite relatable, and that society at large does have a duty to its young folks and its education system to make sure that they are receiving the best most transparent access to opportunities that they are able. And I think that this novel casts a light on those areas of society potentially that should be considered home for improvements and home for a sharper flashlight, so to speak, to cast upon those places where people could easily fall through the cracks because they're not completely misinformed, or they jump at an opportunity and are over-eager in a situation where they could get in over their heads and not find an easy and viable way out for themselves. And especially, I believe in an area like law, I think that these demarcations should be closely considered by people responsible for those in the education system. And this is a precept that I think should be generalized in all sectors of education to best benefit the quote-unquote actors, meaning actors in life that would deign to receive an education in a so-called institution, and therefore have faith and confidence that this institution would absolutely act in its best interests. And I think the idea of a legal diploma mill that is propped up by uncaring actors on a for-profit stage, if it can be theoretically translated into anything that people experience in an overwhelming and crushing amount of pressure and unfair volley of advertising, I think should be redressed and addressed. So I think this novel was interesting to me, and I'm glad I revisited it and felt a more urgent need for improvements to be made in sectors where other people might either turn a blind eye as their perhaps default sensibility for various reasons, or they might have skin in the game to keep it in a state of perpetual immiseration. So those are just my preliminary thoughts about institutions in general and why they are important and necessary for attention.